Welcome to our Ask an Expert Parent Education Series sponsored by Konick and Associates. I'm Dr. Lisa Konick. I'm a psychologist and founder of Konick and Associates, which is a group practice specializing in child and family behavioral health and psychological assessment services. The purpose of these presentations are to provide important information and resources to individuals and families in our community. This is the first segment for our series on Autism Awareness Month, and today we will be featuring Nina. Nina is an interesting and impressive young lady that I have the pleasure to know, who also happens to be an individual with autism. Welcome, Nina. Thank you so much for joining today. Nina's going to be talking about her life with autism, thriving in a neurotypical world. And we're going to be recording this series. So please, you'll be muted on entry. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. And we will be answering those as we go through the presentation, or you can unmute yourself to ask a question. That's okay too. Nina, one of the questions we wanted to start with is, when did you learn about your autism diagnosis?
Well, when I was 11, I remember doing some research online and bringing up to my parents that I thought that I was autistic. And I was kind of like laughed at by my whole family, and they were like, no, you're definitely not autistic. And you know just as well as I do that, I was 11 in 2007, and there even now isn't that much research being done into like autism itself. So the only ideas people usually have about autism are like the stereotypical autism that is, talked about and represented in media. So I wasn't actually diagnosed until I was 17. I only was able to receive accommodations my last year of high school. And I wish I was diagnosed sooner.
And that's an interesting thing to say, because I think a lot of times as clinicians, we do a lot of neurodiverse assessments and work with neurodiverse clients in our practice. And one of the things that I think is, stressful for a lot of people is to give that diagnosis to a family. And you're saying it was actually somewhat relieving. And I have heard that from other clients that we've worked with as well, is they're relieved to have an explanation. So what does being neurodiverse mean to you, Nina?
Well, I think that people need to understand that just like there's biodiversity in all species, there's also neurodiversity in all species, and not everyone's brain is going to work the same. We in the community refer to people with the average brain type as neurotypical, and people with, the different types of brain types as neurodivergent. Neurodivergent encompasses ADHD, Tourette's, schizophrenia, dyslexia, and autism. And I think it's really important for people to understand this, that autistic people don't need to be fixed. People with ADHD don't need to be fixed. We just need to be understood and accommodated, and that's the only way that we'll be able to thrive.
And you really are thriving, Nina. I think you're really showing so many areas of success in your life, and I think we'd all like to hear about those. You and I were just talking offline about how a lot of the research and the information that's available to the community or to the public or to the clinical community is written or prepared through written by clinicians, and not very much of it's written by individuals with autism. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, if you look in certain areas online, there's actually a very large amount of material written by autistic people, even material written by autistic psychologists. But the ones that receive the most traffic and the most representation in autism organizations are unfortunately a lot of pieces written and published by clinicians and psychologists who do not have autism.
Do you have suggestions, Nina, for people who maybe want to learn more about autism, being parents or educators, or even individuals with autism, where they might research some information from the community that they feel more connected to?
Well, on social media, there's a whole bunch of like groups on Facebook, Instagram pages. I think there's maybe even a corner of Twitter dedicated to it, although I'm not on Twitter. I think that for people who are around autistic people, putting in the work to find this correct information and doing the research is really vital. Even if you look on Google, you can find a lot. There's a few organizations like the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN, which is an autistic-led for autistic organization, and they always put out a whole bunch of different resources.
Do you find those helpful, Nina, for yourself?
Well, a lot of it's stuff I already know, like how to live with someone with autism, or how to relate to someone with autism. I already know. But it's,
I guess
a lot of things they talk about are interesting. Like I recently learned about audio processing disorder, which I didn't know was a thing. I thought it was just sort of an aspect of being neurodivergent.
So some of that information is definitely useful for people that maybe have a new diagnosis, or that are trying to understand somebody, like a sibling or a family member.
Yeah, I just have to grab my phone charger. Okay, I got it. Sorry.
Nina, would you talk about your school experiences? This might be an interesting issue for you, because you said you didn't get identified with autism until late into your school trajectory. So you didn't have a lot of supports in place. What was school, like for you?
Growing up, I really didn't like school. I think I got like an A once in 5th grade, and it was because I had a really supportive teacher. In general, I think I got C's and D's my whole life in school, up until I graduated high school. And it was interesting because I would take tests and quizzes and get 100% on everything. I understood the materials through and through, but I had a really hard time with homework, and I almost never turned in my homework or essays or take-home assignments on time, and that was what contributed to my low grade.
So you knew the material, but you just struggled with the balancing act of, and we have a lot of clients who struggle with that too. And it creates a lot of family stress.
Yeah, and it leads to a lot of self-deprecating thoughts and behaviors, especially if you have family members and teachers telling you that you have so much potential, but you're lazy, or that you need to put in more effort. Lazy was a word I heard a lot. And it was really difficult not being diagnosed and dealing with that, because I thought that everyone felt the same way that I did, and that they just somehow managed to cope with it in a way that I wasn't able to. I felt like I was just genuinely lazy, and I didn't have the, wherewithal to complete my assignments, and, there was something fundamentally wrong with me.
How about socially in school? Did you have any difficulties with peer relationships?
In my early, elementary school, I had a lot of difficulties making friends. I had a lot of problems with being bullied for being weird, which I think is a sentiment that a lot of autistic people can relate to, is being bullied for being weird. When I went into middle school, I moved, and the community that I moved into was really welcoming, and I ended up having a lot of great friendships in that area.
Great. Do you have anything, if you could give suggestions for teachers, what would you want them to know? Or parents, for that matter.
Well, I think it's important to understand that a lot of kids have problems completing assignments, especially kids who are autistic. And considering that there isn't a lot of information that's like credited and published about autistic people that teachers have access to, and clinicians have access to. So a lot of kids may struggle in these areas, but not have a formal diagnosis to receive accommodations. So if a child seems like they understand the material, but are struggling to complete assignments at home, it's not because they're lazy. Every kid wants to get A's, every kid. Nobody's lazy. We just need a little bit of help. Some people need help in different areas. Some kids aren't neurodivergent, they just have a lot going on at home. They're dealing with things that you don't know about. So telling someone that they have a lot of potential, but they need to stop being lazy. Lazy isn't a thing that exists in the human brain. People aren't lazy. Everyone has a reason for not doing something. And understanding that as a teacher is really important. The teachers that understood that in my life were the only reason I graduated high school.
That's good that you had some understanding teachers. Tell us about sensory sensitivities in autism, Nina.
Well, it's funny that you say sensory sensitivities and autism, because when I think of autism, sensory sensitivity is the number one thing that comes to mind, something every autistic person can relate to. I think that for a lot of my life, before I started coming to terms and doing research into my own neurology, I sort of went through life in a dissociative state, sort of protecting myself from all of the sensory stimuli that I wasn't able to process, and protecting myself from sensory overwhelm. And looking back, it was kind of dangerous. I was bottling up a lot. I didn't really have a negativity bias because I had sort of drowned it out. And now that I'm able to accommodate my sensory sensitivity, I'm able to be more present and in the moment. And although I now have to like accommodate things that I didn't have to accommodate before, it's a lot easier for me to go through my life. I'm not so exhausted all the time, and I didn't know why I was exhausted.
You know, when you and I have talked about the spoon theory before, can you speak to that, Nina? Because I think that really does explain to, you know, a neurotypical individual what it might be like for an individual with autism to navigate their day.
Yeah, the spoon theory was developed by an autistic psychologist. Basically, it's the idea that we all wake up in the morning with, say you wake up in the morning with 10 spoons, and that's sort of your, not physical energy for the day, but like mental energy for the day. And say you use, you know, 1 spoon to get ready for work, maybe 2 spoons on the way there if there's a lot of traffic. You might use a couple spoons at work to get through the day. Then when you get home, you're still left with like 5 spoons. You might use like 1 to get dinner ready and get ready for bed, and you're still left with 4. For an autistic person or someone with ADHD, they might wake up in the morning with 5 spoons, and it might take 3 spoons to take a shower, and it might take 2 spoons just to brush your teeth. Then you're not left with any spoons left for the rest of the day. So people who are neurodivergent often have to decide between activities that will leave them with enough spoons to get through their day. So oftentimes people who are autistic or have ADHD, will skip a shower in the morning because they know that they have a meeting at work, or they will take a different way to work even though it's longer because they know they won't be able to deal with having traffic. And if you use up all of your spoons for the day, you can borrow spoons from the next day, but that means you'll be left with even less when you wake up. I know that for me, I work full time now, and I do some extra work, data entry work on the side. So I have to make sure that I get at least like 11 hours of sleep at night. I have to set alarms to make sure that I'm eating, and I have to make sure that I'm drinking enough water. I sort of set up my environment so that it's not very sensory stimulating. My lights are very dim. I have a lot of soft stuffed animals around my environment. I have a lot of plants, which I really like. And that just sort of maybe a little bit helps me with getting through my day. I obviously still struggle in some areas, but just it can be a little bit invalidating when people ask neurodivergent people to do this long list of things that we quite frankly are not able to do. We're not able to complete them and still be physically healthy.
Nina, how does that, oh, I'm getting an echo here. Hold on a second. We were just talking about spoon theory, and it made me think about challenges that you might be facing in the workplace as you talk about spoons.
Currently, my job is perfect for me. I work in an office and I do data entry, so I'm doing something really repetitive, not having to interface with a lot of people, and I'm in sort of my own space with not that many people around me at my work. But before this, I worked primarily in food service, and it was really unhealthy for me to be working in food service. I sort of saw the people around me doing all this stuff, working 11-hour days every day, and still maintaining the appearance of health. And I figured if they can do it, that I can do it. And comparing yourself as a neurodivergent person, comparing yourself to neurotypical success like that is just a recipe for disaster. I only had to request accommodations at work once to wear my headphones when I worked in a bakery, and they were very accommodating. So I haven't really had that much experience requesting accommodations in the workplace. I've heard that it's usually okay, but I know that I've heard from a lot of people that they've been fired directly after requesting accommodations for small reasons that were obviously cover-ups for their request.
So really one of the things it sounds like that is important, Nina, is if you are struggling with certain sensory things, it's probably a good fit to find the type of job that you're going to be able to have a good fit for. Like you said, you sound like you're much happier now in your current place of employment.
Yeah, a lot of self-awareness goes into existing and thriving as an autistic person in a world that wasn't built for us. Just for reasons like that. A lot of autistic people would love working in a bakery. It didn't work for me, but I heard about, an autistic young man who makes pasta and he loves it and he does it for a living. So just knowing the type of person that you are and finding the area that will best suit you is really important. You can't just work anywhere.
And tell us about stimming behaviors, Nina. I know that people have had questions about stimming and, what does it mean to be stimming?
Yeah, so stimming, it's short for, I think, self-stimulatory behavior. It sounds kind of weird, but it's basically a neurodivergent person's way of processing their surroundings. So neurotypical people also stim. Like when you're nervous, you might kind of fidget with your hands. Imagine if you were told not to fidget with your hands when you're nervous, you'd probably get way more nervous. And that's sort of how stimming is. If we're really excited, or if we're nervous, or if we're in the grocery store and it's too much noise, a lot of us might do some sort of emotion to help us process that, and it calms us down, helps us think clearly. And it's a really important part of our survival as neurodivergent people. A lot of, because of social norms, most of us are sort of forced to suppress our stims into more suitable stims, like something like doing this, or like there's little stim toys that they make for us to play with. But it just sort of goes back into, masking and how that's part of life as an autistic person.
So if parents are seeing their children stimming, we should encourage them to allow that.
Yes, stimming is a great thing. It definitely looks super weird if you're not autistic. Seeing someone like rocking back and forth really fast might look like they're having a nervous breakdown, but if the person's autistic, they're just having a great time. It's nothing to be worried about. It's a great thing.
And we talked a little bit about work. I wonder, Nina, kind of back to that, what would you want an employer to know about individuals with autism in the workplace? Do you have any specific recommendations or thoughts?
Well, my biggest problem in the workplace has probably been getting burnt out from getting burnt out from sort of the idea of hyper productivity in the workplace. And it's sort of glamorized these days to sort of sacrifice your health for your work. People like glorifying not getting that much sleep because they were working, or working 12-hour days every day. It's almost become something that's expected of employers. And I've definitely burnt myself out trying to reach those high expectations. For most autistic people do great in a lot of different areas. It can just be difficult for us to be forced to keep up with this hyper productivity. Attendance was an issue of mine for a long time due to burnout. I think a lot of autistic people need more rest to get through their day, because, like I said, we're existing in a world that wasn't built for us. If you were existing in a world that was specifically built for autistic people, you would have a hard time too. And a lot of workplaces don't have extensive or any autism training, which I think is important, because there's a lot more autistic people in the world than people seem to think, especially since diagnoses are kind of hard to come by. Not everyone has access to a diagnosis. I know that you need a formal diagnosis to receive accommodations, but I think being accommodating of different neurologies can go further than just receiving a diagnosis and being forced to accommodate the individual.
Nina, how would you say neurodiversity or being neurodivergent has benefited you?
Well, um, there's a lot of like little things that I really like about it. Like if I hear a sound, I can replay it in my head over and over again, like songs or anything, someone's voice. Um, it can be, oh, I almost never think about this. It can be sort of a gift to be able to notice details in things. I'm really good at my job doing data entry because I'm really good at doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's the same reason I was a good baker. I think a lot of autistic people are proud of their attention to detail as well.
I would agree with that, Nina. And I have talked to employers and individuals like Autism Turning Point Foundation for Autism, and they employ a lot of individuals, or they support people who are attempting to explore career and vocational pursuits. And employers' feedback is that, you know, a lot of individuals with autism are very loyal in their workplace. They do enjoy that consistency and some repetition, and they like to have the predictability of the workplace. So they can be long-term, very strong employees once they are accommodated appropriately. So hopefully
Yeah,
this
and we
job.
tend to be very straightforward. There's no beating around the bush with us. We say what we mean. We kind of wish everyone else would say what they mean too, but it's fine. And yeah, a lot of autistic people are really loyal. We can't really, if we work somewhere, it's hard for us to envision working somewhere else. Our brains just don't really work like that.
How do you, we talked about consistency, Nina. How do routines work in your favor? You and I have talked in the past about routines a little bit. You seem to like your routines.
Yeah, I have recently cultivated a very strong routine, and it's probably changed my life. Autistic people, we just thrive in our routines. When, a lot of neurodivergent or neurotypical people, especially my age, in my early 20s, will sort of flop all over the place, not get that much sleep, go to work, go hang out with friends, make random plans. And we really thrive, like going to bed at the same time every night, going grocery shopping in the same day every week. I even eat the same thing every day during the week. And it's really beneficial because our brains are moving all day, and we have enough to worry about without having to think about what's going to happen next. It's better for us to just expect it. And when our routines are changed for whatever reason, a lot of people will sort of flippantly change my routine. Like if I have plans to do something with, say, like my aunt, today, and she were to text me, oh, instead of going to this place, we're actually going to do this instead. It could throw off my whole day, even my whole weekend. Trying to get myself back into the space of having a routine can be very disorienting. And that's why a lot of autistic children who aren't used to that sort of disorientation, changing their routine can actually make them go into a meltdown. And the parent or caregiver might not know why that meltdown is happening. So I think knowing the importance of routines in autistic people is really important if you're in an autistic person's life.
Nina, what advice would you have? Because this is an issue with parents a lot and teachers when routines are disrupted. And sometimes they have to be, if we were planning to go to the park and it's raining and we can't go, what recommendations would you have for how to support an individual in being a little more flexible with some of these unpredictable changes?
Yeah. Well, in general, meltdowns happen because our needs aren't being met in some way. Maybe like the light's too bright, or like there's a weird smell in the room, or maybe my shirt is just the wrong material. Any of those things on their own can make an individual have a meltdown. And they might not be able to verbalize what exactly is happening that's causing the meltdown. So being cognizant of those things that can happen will, help a caregiver or parent prevent the meltdown and or care for the child who's having a meltdown. But if a child's like actively having a meltdown, they need to be put into a sensory-free zone in order to calm down. It'll be very difficult for a child to calm down in the environment where the meltdown happened because the thing that is causing it is still happening.
That's an excellent tip. Thank you for that. What are some other strategies, Nina? And I think people would love to hear ways that you've managed aspects of your life. What has been helpful to you?
Well, I wrote this down. Okay. In a material sense, I found things like making lists, keeping planners and calendars and reminders on my phone. Little things like that, very helpful. I tend to stack, lists, to-do lists, my calendar, my reminders. Like I can't have enough, even if they're all for the same thing, because oftentimes, if you set one reminder and you set a lot of reminders all the time, that reminder might just kind of like go into the background of your brain because you're used to them. So keeping all of those things is really helpful. And it's been really important for me not to compare my strategies to those used successfully by neurotypical people, because as I've said before, autistic success and neurotypical success look extremely different, and it can be really unhealthy for an autistic person to strive toward a neurotypical version of success. But in a cognitive sense, being granted the space to actually be my authentic autistic self, to manage my areas of difficulty in ways that specifically work for me, and developing a support network that understands and has done independent research on autism has been really vital for me. In the morning, every day, or I try to do it every day, I make a list of my goals for the day, my mental goal, my emotional goal, my spiritual goal, my physical goal, and my financial goal for the day. And even if I don't look at it again for the rest of the day, it really helps me sort of clear my vision of what I want the day to look like. Because like I said, for most neurodivergent people, we have a consistent inner monologue. And it can be really difficult for us to even like know what is going on when our brains are just constantly talking about sometimes things that don't even make sense. So it's sort of like having like a cheat sheet to go back to if I feel like my brain is like I'm having racing thoughts. I just sort of go to my cheat sheet and I read my goals, and then I'm like, oh yeah, so that's what's happening.
Nina, I should have mentioned this when we opened up at the beginning of our talk. Nina is a young adult who has gone to college. She has some college classes. She's full-time employed. She's in a relationship. She has wonderful relationships and connections with her family. And I think we'll be moving into her own independent living environment soon, correct?
Yep.
So I think for those of you who are listening, I mean, Nina's definitely been a wealth of wonderful experience. She's really thriving in becoming more independent. And I think it will give a lot of families hope. And we do have some questions here, Nina. The first one is, first of all, you are remarkable. Thank you for sharing your story with us. What are your favorite hobbies or things to do?
I'm trying to get into crocheting, but for a lot of autistic people, our hobbies revolve around our special interests. In the autistic community, we refer to it as our spins, like SPIN, special interests. My special interests are plants, house plants, and cats. But I also love to shoot my bow. I love archery, and I love to hang out with my boyfriend.
And you're not going to be a cat lady with a hoarding problem, right?
I will.
How many cats do you have now?
I just have one, but she's a handful.
One is probably good. Here's a question, and I think it is a very good question that has been asked in other areas, and I get asked this question a lot, Nina. Did you tell your employer about your autism at the time of your interview?
I have only done that once, and it was because the employer just seemed really nice. And it ended up being great because he actually hired me because I was autistic, because he'd had success having an autistic employee in the past. At my current job, I did not, only because I'm a temp and I want to keep this job. But once I'm hired on permanently, which is in the works, it's happening, we've been talking about it, I probably will tell them about my diagnosis.
Were you reluctant to do so, Nina? Did you fear that that might influence your employability?
Yes. 100%.
Was that due to the nature of this particular position?
Just in general, it's sort of a nerve-wracking thing because, like I said, I've heard a lot of autistic people tell me about how they opened up to their employer about their diagnosis and were fired shortly after. And since Illinois is an at-will state, it's something that is a real possibility.
Another work-related question, Nina. Are you able to take extra breaks during the day at work if needed?
I think I probably would be. I don't need them. If I did, then I would obviously tell, the people, my employers, that I need them. And I'm sure that I would be able to get them where I'm working now.
Another question is, what finally led you to get diagnosed?
Well, for autistic people, especially growing up, we know that there's something not normal about us. Even if we don't have a diagnosis, we know that there's something going on. If we don't have a diagnosis, we're just going to go on thinking that there's something fundamentally wrong with our brains. But we know that there's something up. A lot of autistic people struggle for years and years to get a diagnosis. All autistic people, I think, know that they're autistic. Not all of us are able to get diagnoses. Like I said, I knew that I was autistic from the time I was 11, but I wasn't able to get diagnosed until I was 17.
Positive comment about your plants being lovely.
Thanks.
What advice do you have, if any, Nina, for individuals with autism as they plan the transition to becoming more independent, such as transitioning to college, transitioning to employment, or living or independently?
Yeah, I think a lot of neurotypical people, when they talk about this stage of life, the focus is sort of on what you need to be doing. Like you need to focus on doing your schoolwork, you need to focus on budgeting, you need to focus on like making sure you're going to work or whatever. And I think that you need to focus on taking the best care of yourself as you possibly can, nourishing your autistic self, because things are a lot more difficult if you are bottling up a part of you. I know that when I went through a period where I was doing a lot, I was going to work from midnight until 8 a.m. and then going straight to my 9:30 a.m. class. And I had to go to the hospital. I had to go to inpatient after a while because it was severely affecting my health. And a lot of neurotypical people would be able to do that with no problem. Like I said, comparing your success to neurotypical success is a recipe for failure. Looking at your neurotypical peers and saying that you should be there at your age is a recipe for failure. I think that you shouldn't compare yourself to anyone except your past self. And taking the time to be aware of what you specifically need. I sometimes take breaks throughout the day and I say, how do I feel right now? And I like to say it out loud if I can. I'll be like, how do I feel right now? Well, right now, I'm feeling sort of excited, sort of anxious because I'm having this panel. You know, something like that. And after doing that for a while, it sort of became natural and a way for me to stay grounded. And I have a book that I've been reading that's been giving me a lot of advice about how to thrive as an independent autistic person. But the biggest thing I think is to just make sure that you're nourishing yourself. Know that you might need more rest than your peers. You might not be able to do as many things in the day. It's okay to tell people that you can't hang out because you already did something today, or that it might interfere with your routine. And making sure that the people in your life have done their research so that they're able to be as accommodating of you as possible.
Nina, you have given us so much wonderful information today. I greatly appreciate everything you're saying. Are there any other questions? Oh, here we have one. What is the name of the book?
It's called Living Independently on the Autism Spectrum, and it's by Lynn Soraya, which is like Soraya.
And you're finding that helpful. Before we sign off for today, we're open to taking any other questions from those in attendance today, and we will be putting this on our Facebook page, on the Konick and Associates Facebook page, as well as on our website, so you can view it later or share it. Nina, you've been wonderful. Are there any particular apps that you like that you might like to share, or time management tools or reminder tools?
I use this time management app. It's called Tiimo, Tiimo, and it helps me plan my day. A lot of the things that I feel are monotonous to write in my daily list that I write on paper, I put in the app. Nowadays, I put all of my to-do list in the app and I just write my goals on paper, which saves me a lot of time.
Do you have any final advice, Nina, for parents or caregivers if they have maybe a young adolescent who is, you know, soon to be planning some of these transitions in life?
I just think it's important to look for and listen to autistic adult advice. That's almost everywhere online. You can find it. There's a lot of groups that are run by autistic people that are specifically for neurotypical parents to join and ask questions. It's on Facebook, on Instagram, on every social media platform. And a lot of autistic people, adults, are used to getting dismissed by parents because we don't tell them exactly what they want to hear. But we were autistic children at one point, and we made it past that. So we kind of have the best advice you could ask for when it comes to raising an autistic person.
Nina, another question is, do you think family counseling is helpful for understanding what an autistic person experiences?
To an extent, as long as the person leading the session is familiar with autism. But a lot of times when I was in family therapy sessions, I hated them because I felt like I was doing a performance and I wasn't actually able to say what I wanted to say. It can be really overstimulating to be put into that sort of an environment if you're not already used to being open with your parents. I think a good alternative might be to have a notebook where you can communicate with your child and not have to have the communication be face-to-face, because discourse that relies on face-to-face communication with an individual who has a neurology that affects their ability to communicate face-to-face isn't always going to be super effective.
So getting around that with some other options might be helpful.
Yeah.
Great questions, everyone. In the sake of time, Nina, you've been with us for almost an hour, and I greatly appreciate everything you said today. You know, if there's any other questions, please feel free to email them to me, and I can certainly find a way to connect and get back to you. Any final remarks, Nina?
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And like I said, we will be putting this up on our website for you to review later. We have another talk next week on education and autism, and then a final talk at the end of this month on therapeutic supports for individuals with autism. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much, Nina. You have been a wealth of information to us.
Thanks.
Have a great night.